break and said, hey guys, well, guess what? We've got a transfer.
He was my fraternity brother's older
Sacrifice that
brother.
the American people.
Prosperous communities have healthy environments.
For us now, she lived in trafficking for 4 years. I really felt, for a lot of reasons, I felt for them, but I didn't have the guts to stand up.
Sean Dietrich always liked to write, but when you drop out of school in the 7th grade, it's hard to get a credible writing job. Somehow, Dietrich maneuvered himself back into the classroom at a junior college. Then he was shunned by big-time university academia. So he did what writers do, write. And it's worked out rather well. You probably know him as Sean of the South. His work has appeared in Newsweek, Garden and Gun, and Southern Living. He has a popular podcast and radio show. It's a mix of storytelling and music. And he's authored over 15 books. His latest, a novel entitled Kinfolk. We welcome Sean of the South to Conversations. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
I'm proud to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's been a long time coming. We had tried to put this show together back before COVID, so it's worked out well for us because you've only become more popular. So
that just shows you how far down the world has gone.
No. Tell me a little bit about how you got started. I mentioned in the intro that you liked to write as a kid. So where did it start? Where did all that germinate?
When I was a child, I'd loved to write because it was primarily a form of like escapism. So I could write longhand or type, and I could be in this world that I created for myself. And that's the most early memories of writing that I have. I remember my mother bought me a Latera 32 typewriter made by the Olivetti Corporation.
Right.
And from just, I don't know where she got it. It was seafoam blue, had a crooked space bar, and the B button. The B key did not work, so I could write without B's. And I remember writing on that thing for a long time, using my index fingers. And that was about 5th grade when I started using that typewriter. And my life has been in trouble ever since.
Tell me a little bit about kind of your early childhood. You make no bones about it. You kind of had a rough time.
Yeah, I was, so I wasn't a very gifted child. Nobody really expected much out of me, and for the most part, I'm pretty sure they haven't been disappointed.
No.
They really, the people I come from were blue-collar people. My daddy was an iron worker. His daddy was an iron worker. All his brothers were iron workers, and I think perhaps that's what they expected from me. But my father was very unique in that he grasped the finer things in culture, and he wanted those accessible to his son, me, even though he himself did not understand them or like them or appreciate them. And a great example of that is he was a Hank Sr. fan, music-wise, but he always listened to classical music on his truck radio because he wanted me to somehow like and appreciate classical music. And I remember listening one day thinking, I don't understand this stuff. And what is this? He said, I don't know. I can't stand it either, but you need to learn how to like it because it's good for you. So those are the people I came from. And my daddy barely finished high school. He was a very terse individual. I think today we would call them bipolar, but back then there was at least no name among my people for it. Maybe manic depressive. He had a lot of problems. He came from a very, very broken, busted up home, and he brought those problems with him. And he shot himself when I was 11 years old. And it was a dark time of life for me. I learned what it meant to be blackballed by a community because there's certain taboos and folkways that are associated with such a terrible death like that, or with crime. I see this a lot in kids who go through, like a parent who's incarcerated or something. And the way that children deal with it among themselves and the way that adults deal with children like this is not to do it at all, is to just distance themselves. So I became kind of a a disease, is what I felt like. And that's how I grew up. I grew up an outsider, which now at this stage of my life is very good for a writer because it gives you a different perspective. You learn a lot about your fellow human being, and you learn a lot about yourself. So as you said in your intro, I dropped out of school when I was in 7th grade, which wasn't very far after that. Education, this hasn't been that long ago, but I'm getting older, I guess. But in those days, among my people, education was not as pushed or valued or stressed as it is today. And so there was really not a whole lot of fuss put up about it. You either worked or you went to school, and you really didn't do both. And so I dropped out. Nobody said anything about it, and I got a job hanging drywall. And I learned immediately that that people out there work really, really hard for their money. I mean, that day that I was hanging drywall, I was set on mud duty, and I mudded all the joints, and I taped them, and then sanded them until I looked like Casper the Friendly Ghost at the end of the day. And it was about an 8-hour workday, and I rode in the back seat of the truck on the way home with some Mexican laborers who didn't speak English, and they were looking at me and kind of smiling because they had all been working since they were much younger than that. And there was this camaraderie that I felt, and when I got out of that truck, I knew that my life would really never be the same. And so I worked my way through those years. I'm giving you more than you asked for, but you told me to elaborate.
Absolutely.
When I was a grown man, I was already married. My wife encouraged me to try out college. Now, I had always wanted to go to college, but heck, I didn't have full middle school, no high school. There's no way that could happen. I remember I was on a job site one day, and what really drove me to the arms of academia was a man who was laying tile next to me. By then I was a tile layer, and we were on our knees, and we were trialing the floor with thin set, and he said, "Did you know that I'm a doctor?" And I said, "If you're a doctor, I'm a nurse." And he said, "No, I really am. I'm a doctor." He says, "Not an MD, I'm a PhD." He says, "And you know how easy it is to get all that?" He says, "It's not nearly as hard as people tell you. We want everybody to think it's hard, but it's not." He said, "All it is you go into a room, you listen to a professor who has an ego the size of Texas, just gesticulate for about an hour. You remember everything he says, and you remember enough to vomit it back onto a page to soothe and gratify his ego. If you can do that and pass the test, you get your degree." Well, I said, "Well, I can do that." So I went to a community college. Northwest Florida State College is what it is now. But when I was going there, I believe it was OW. The college used to be OWJC, which was Okaloosa Walton Junior College. Then it changed to OWCC, Okaloosa Walton Community College. Then it changed to OWC, Okaloosa Walton College. Then OW, then Northwest Florida State College, which means I hold a degree from 5 separate universities. And I walked in there. I told them I'd like to go to college, and the lady behind the counter told me, "I don't see that happening. If you don't have transcripts, you don't have nothing. You don't have your GED?" I said, "No." She said, "You don't have anything to show me?" I said, "Nothing, but I'd like to be here." And I turned to walk out after getting kind of told that there was no hope. And a lady came from the back and told me that there was a way. And the way to go to college, she thought for me, was to take a test that they give to people who have been homeschooled. And they have to test these people who come in to know that they have learned what they say they've learned, even though they have no official transcripts. And if you can pass this test, you're in college. Well, I come from a long line of men who make bad decisions. I looked at her and I said, I'll take that test now. She said, "Well, it's very hard. You don't want to just try to willy-nilly this test. I said, I want to do it. Now, my one saving grace in the time after I dropped out, my one saving grace was that I was a huge patron of my local library. And these local librarians were good to me, and they curated a selection of books for me every week. And they started with the addictive spy novels and pulp novels so that I could read these things and in effect a desire for reading in me. And then they would move on to some of the books that were, a little headier. And I never quit reading. And it's amazing what you learn when you read and you don't know you're learning it.
That's right, that's right.
So I took this test, I passed it, and the lady looked at me and said, "You're in college." And after that, the first class I took was a creative writing class. And that's how I began doing what I'm doing.
You're off to the races. I do want to get to the point just kind of quick, like you tried to take your degree one step further.
Yeah, after I came to an end with community college, I was going to go and try to really pursue writing on a much more aggressive course of action. And I went and applied to a university which will remain nameless, but is located at 1600 Florida State University Parkway. And I had to audition or submit my stuff to the program, and they were honest with me, saying that your education is a shipwreck, and we have no space for you. And I said, well, will there be any space for me in the future? They said, I don't think so. And I had already rented an apartment at that time over in Tallahassee, and I went back to that apartment, and I was a wreck. And actually, that was the first week that I began writing what became the Shaun of the South blog, which has become my career. Knock on wood, career.
How fast did it take off?
Very fast, a lot faster than I thought. Now, I had shopped around some of my writing to newspapers before. I've always admired the structure and the format of a columnist, because the columnist is totally different than a novelist or a long-form writer, in that you have your long form, and they're more like Mozart. Mozart could, or any composer. A composer can take a year of time and compose an hour's worth of music for you. But what you're listening to during that hour is a year. Whereas a jazz musician takes an hour gig and plays an hour's worth of stream of consciousness music. In a lot of ways, a columnist is a lot like that jazz musician. Right. And so he has to develop a different set of chops than a long-form writer has. He has to know how to sell something very quickly, and I've always admired that. It's a very unique skill that's disappearing at the end of the newspaper age. So I had gone to newspapers and submitted my work, and I was told consistently that nobody wants to read this anymore. This is like the old stuff, the old columns. This is not where the world is. If it bleeds, it leads. Right. We want guts. Get out there and find us a gut-wrenching story with some action and blood to it. And I couldn't do it. That's not who I am. So every time I'd mine for a story, I would go to the nursing home, which is not good in their mind. So I began publishing these stories, these kinds of feel-good stories, for lack of a better term, on a blog, and I had no clue that anybody would care. And I believe the first story that really truly went what I guess would be termed viral was a story of me walking around a Winn-Dixie, and I saw 3 Latino boys who were at the meat counter. And these boys stood at the meat counter looking at the cheapest cuts of meat they could find, and they were covered in drywall mud. And these boys, as they looked at this food, decided that it was too expensive, and they turned to walk away. And as they were turning to walk away, the butcher came from behind and said, "Look," and he set this huge pile of contained meat in the stack and said, I have to get rid of this tomorrow. No one's going to buy it. It's going to go bad. It's going to go to waste anyway. I'm just going to give it to you. Would you like it? And the boys, in their limited English, thanked him. I wrote about it. I wrote 500 words about it, and I put it online, and the thing had comments in almost every language on the globe.
Wow.
It was powerful to me to realize that I might have found something that I was made to do. Maybe I have found something that I was formed to do, which was something I've been looking for a long time.
What was your first big published article outside of the blog? I mean, because you've been in magazines, you've written books.
I wrote a story that was my first Newsweek story. It was about visiting a grave in Auburn, Alabama, of a close friend, and I didn't expect anything to happen with it, and I wasn't even shopping it around for anything to happen with it. And Newsweek picked it up, and I think I had to change my trousers after I got that phone call.
I bet.
I was completely shocked. Yeah, that was the biggest. That was one of the bigger ones. There have been others.
I mean, that's, you know, and particularly a few years back, I mean, Newsweek, I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it was very validating. And
Yeah.
I think what's sad about me is that I've needed validation. And I hate that about myself. I hate that I have needed validation. But knowing that about myself, I want to give validation to other writers, which is what I try to do, because a lot of people need validation. It's not unique. And so I get a lot of messages, a lot of email, a lot of snail mail from writers, and my goal, if I can, is to give them, if they see me as anything, which that's their problem if they do, I want to give them validation, because it's amazing what somebody can do when they believe they have the credibility to do it.
I'm just curious. Newsweek magazine, I'm gonna backtrack for a second. When you were riding around in that pickup truck with your father, and he was playing classical music, Newsweek magazine would have been huge.
Right.
Newsweek, Time, U.S. News, World Report. Did it go back in your mind at any point and did you go, Dad, I made it? Because could you imagine what he would have thought?
So there have been many of those little punctuations in my life where that's my thought, like, I can't imagine what he'd be thinking right now. That was definitely a crest where I thought that. That was, he was a big reader, and he was one who taught me to love reading. I say this because I'm on PBS, which is bizarre, but he loved Masterpiece Theater, and we would watch Masterpiece Theater, and whenever he would find a show that he liked, he would always research to find if it had been a book first, and then we would cease watching any of that series, and we would go back to reading the books first before he allowed us to watch Masterpiece Theater, such as Sherlock Holmes or the Agatha Christie stuff. And so we had this thing between us where we always read, and he read things like Newsweek, so that would have been huge. Same thing with like the Opry and the other things.
And I want to talk about that, because your show, your genre is not only storytelling, and you do it through your writing, but you also do it through performing and through music. And if I'm not mistaken, thus far you've been on the Grand Ole Opry 2 times.
Three times.
3 times
Yeah.
now. And for anybody that knows anything about music, and especially country music, that's a huge, huge deal.
Yeah.
So I read somewhere your parents had taken you when you were a child to the Grand Ole Opry in
Yeah.
Nashville, Tennessee. Take it from there.
So we lived in Nashville. We lived in Spring Hill, Tennessee for a short time, because my daddy, being the iron worker, would go wherever the need. They called them boomers. He'd go wherever the work was, and they were building what was then the Saturn plant, but became the GM plant, and it was the biggest thing my daddy had ever done. And I didn't think about it like that until just recently, realizing the size and breadth and enormity of this plant, and the position that they gave him as a foreman, which was unusual for him. This was a big, big deal for him. So we lived there for a short time, and being so close to Nashville, he he wanted to take me to the Opry because we listened to the Opry.
Sure.
And back then, people still, you know, they listened to radio.
Sure.
So we always tuned in on Saturdays. Loved it. So they took me to the Opry, and I remember where we sat. I must have been 5 years old. And my mother later would recall that she remembers where we sat too, and she, in the middle of the Opry, changed my diaper on her lap in these stands while the show was going on, and everybody was giving her these dirty looks, and that she said, "I've paid enough money for these seats, they're gonna watch my baby." And I just hoped that the time that I got called to the Opry that I didn't have a similar experience as an adult. But so this was real special to me. We went back several times, but I'll never forget it. I never forget sitting there and smelling the popcorn and eating a hot dog and watching the men in the 10-gallon hats and the twin fiddle intros and the steel guitar solos and all these wonderful things that make me feel so American. Yeah. And make me feel so connected to the music of my ancestors, my father and all that. And so that was my first initiation into the Opry. Years have gone by, and I quit listening to the Opry at a certain point. Country music ceased to do anything for me, the modern version of country music. I find myself listening to the older stuff. I was working on a manuscript for a novel that will be released in the next 2 days, I think it is. And as I was working on this manuscript, I had not been telling anybody about it. I would never tell anybody about my fiction work until I have what I would consider an almost finished manuscript, because it'll change so many times. Sure. And you'll jinx it if you have a good idea and you tell someone about it. But the nugget of the idea for this manuscript was that I'm going to take an underprivileged child and I'm going to send them somehow to the Grand Ole Opry. That was the idea for the book. And I had just finished the manuscript. You know, it had taken me eight or 9 months to get to that space. And we got the phone call that said, and no one knows about it. My wife doesn't know about this book. Nobody knows about this book. Not even my publishers. Nobody knows what's happening. And this phone call comes through my wife, who's like the CEO of our little deal. And they say, "This is the Grand Ole Opry. We would like to have you on the show." And I remember looking at Jamie saying, "You're lying to me. Who told you about what I'm doing? Who told you about this? Because this is a joke." And she said, "No, this is real." And it was real. We got there to the Grand Ole Opry, and I was just, it was almost like my wedding. I can hardly even remember the details because it was all going past me in like a Monet-style blur. And I get in there, and they have a parking place designated for me with my name on it. And the security guard, knows my name, and the lady who has to frisk me and wand me to make sure that I'm not, through security, is a fan of mine and reads me and wants her picture with me. And I'm crying, and they lead me to a dressing room that they could neither deny nor confirm was Dolly Parton's at one time. And I said, "My cups runneth over." And then comes the show. It's played on a big monitor backstage, and I'm wearing my monkey suit, and I'm tuning up my guitar, and I'm trying to figure out what's happening here. None of this is real. I'm looking in the mirror at myself, and my wife's in there, and I hear on the monitor, they're explaining who's going to be there tonight, and my name comes over the intercom, and then the lady comes back, stage manager says, "It's time." And I mean, my gut just sunk to my, and I walked through that corridor, and I got onto the stage when they called my name, and I doubled over because I saw that wooden circle ahead of me, which is a circle of salvaged wood from the Ryman Auditorium where all of the old greats have performed. And I doubled over, and I cried because in the front of the audience was one of my readers who had printed out a giant cutout of my father's face, who had found it online because I've written about him extensively. And there was my daddy's face cut out, and he was holding it up, and I saw that face in the audience. And it was not just that, it was my mother was sitting in the same section where she had changed my diaper. And I saw people on the, I saw friends and family everywhere. And as I was doubled over, I thought, okay, you have got 5 more seconds to keep crying, then you better suck it up because you are on the Grand Ole Opry. And so I did, something clicked in my brain, the tears shut off, I slurped up the snot up my nose, I walked up to the microphone, and I don't even remember what happened next, but it was the greatest, most transformative night of my life, not because it was the Opry, but because it was one of those rare moments that you get in life, and I believe everybody gets them, where everything comes full circle, and that was why.
I'm going to have you grab that guitar and play us out of here. I have about 2 more minutes left. Your new book is called Kinfolk, and SeanDietrich.com, correct?
Yeah.
Track you down, find all your blogs, radio podcasts,
yes.
And so on and so forth.
My mother says it's like stepping in horse hockey. I'm everywhere.
That's a good thing. You've got a lot of fans. I wish you all the best. I hope maybe that university down the street gives you a call with an honorary doctorate at some point. Let me just float that out there. It might not be a bad idea.
Oh, boy.
Sean, why don't you grab that guitar? I'm going to do a little closing thing here, and then I'm going to get you to play one of your favorite Hank Williams songs as we get out of here. Just want to let everybody know that they can see this and many more of our conversations on the PBS video app or at WSRE.org/conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed our program. Take wonderful care of yourself, and we'll see you soon. Sean Dietrich, take it away.
Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Hey, sweet baby, don't you think maybe we could find us a brand new recipe? I got a hot rod Ford and a $2 bill, and I know a spot right over the hill. There's soda pop and dancing's free, so if you want to have fun, come along with me. Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?